Before we begin this intense and emotional journey, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. Also, drop your city in the comments. We love to know where you're watching from. Now, let's dive in. The moment Sophia Bennett crossed the threshold of the Warrington estate, a strange heaviness wrapped around her like an invisible cloak. The marble floor shimmered beneath a glittering chandelier. The scent of polished wood mingled with fresh roses, yet the house felt more like a curated exhibit than a place to call home. She had married Charles Warrington only 6 months ago, caught up in a whirlwind of charm, wealth, and promises that felt too flawless to question. He was successful, commanding, and endlessly generous, offering her everything except emotional closeness. Sophia had convinced herself that real love could bloom with time. That marriage was about partnership, not fairy tales. But standing in that grand, cold mansion, doubt began to stir. And then she saw him. Julian Warrington stood silently at the top of the staircase, one arm casually resting on the railing. Tall, poised, and unreadable, his dark eyes, so like his father's, watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. At 21, he was only a few years younger than her, but there was nothing boyish about him. He carried himself like someone who knew exactly where he stood and what power he held. Sophia, Charles's voice pulled her back. He strode over to his son, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. "Meet Julian, my son." Son. The word landed with unexpected weight. She had heard of Julian, of course. Charles had mentioned him in passing, always with a hint of irritation. The rebellious streak, the defiance. But nothing had prepared her for this version. Calm, sharp, and quietly disarming. "Sophia Bennett," Julian said, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "So you're the new Mrs. Warrington." There was something teasing, almost mocking in his tone. Sophia responded with a polite, carefully measured smile. "I am." He held her gaze a beat too long before turning away. "Welcome to the family, I guess." The words were dismissive, but there was an undertone she couldn't quite place. That night, as she lay in the enormous bed beside her sleeping husband, Sophia couldn't stop thinking about Julian. Something about him unsettled her and intrigued her. She chalked it up to nerves, to the awkwardness of adjusting to a new home and a new family. She had no idea it was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Days passed, and no matter how hard she tried, Sophia couldn't seem to break through Julian's cold exterior. He was polite, but emotionally distant, respectful, yet removed. Charles, meanwhile, was constantly away, early meetings, late returns, always on the phone, always consumed by work. One evening, as Sophia chopped vegetables in the kitchen, something she did just to feel grounded, she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw Julian leaning against the counter, watching her. "You don't have to do that," he said, nodding toward the knife in her hand. "We have staff for this sort of thing." She shrugged lightly. "I like cooking. It makes the house feel more real." His lips twitched, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "And does it feel real to you?" Sophia hesitated. "I'm still getting used to it." Julian pushed off the counter, walking closer. "My father's good at building beautiful cages. You're not the first." The words sliced through her. Was it a warning? A challenge? "I knew what I was getting into," she replied, but even to her own ears, the words sounded unsure. Julian smirked. "Did you?" Then, just as quickly as he had appeared, he was gone, leaving her with a strange tightness in her chest. From then on, the tension between them grew, quiet but undeniable. It lingered in the way their eyes met across the dinner table, in fleeting touches when passing each other in the hallway. Something unspoken had begun to simmer. One evening, after yet another night of Charles working late, Sophia stepped out onto the balcony to clear her mind. The air was cool against her skin, a small comfort in a world that felt increasingly unfamiliar. Then she heard the door open behind her.
Julian.
He stepped into the moonlight, his expression unreadable as he closed the distance between them. "You don't look happy," he said. She let out a quiet laugh, shaking her head. "That's a dangerous assumption." "Maybe," he said, tilting his head. "But I'm right, aren't I?" Sophia didn't answer.
She didn't want to.
His voice dropped to a murmur. "Do you ever wonder if you made the wrong choice?" Her breath caught. She should have walked away, ended the conversation. But instead, she looked at him, really looked, and in that moment, something shifted. Something neither of them should have allowed. But it was already too late. Sophia couldn't stop thinking about that night on the balcony and the way Julian had looked at her. Not with judgment, not with indifference, but with something far more dangerous. She had first assumed it was nothing, a moment, a flicker, a glance too long to mean nothing, yet too brief to mean something. But there was something else there, something unreadable, yet magnetic. She told herself it was meaningless, a passing current, nothing more. But deep down, she already knew better. And so did he. Days passed. The house felt different. Or maybe she did. Julian remained as distant as ever, buried in work, barely lifting his eyes when she joined him at dinner or slipped into bed alone. His absence filled the rooms more than his presence ever had. The only one who truly felt present was Cole. He was always there, passing her in the hallway, watching her from across a room. He didn't say much, but when he did, his words stayed with her. They settled under her skin and echoed in her mind long after he was gone. And then came the dangerous moments. A brush of fingers that lingered too long. A glance that held a beat too much weight. The subtle smirk he wore when he caught her looking, like he already knew what she was trying to hide. Harper told herself she could handle it, that nothing would happen, that she wouldn't let anything happen. But the tension between them, it was impossible to ignore. And then one night, everything shifted. Julian had left for a business trip, and Harper was alone in the vast, echoing house. Rain pounded against the windows. Thunder rolled in the distance. She curled up on the living room couch, a book in hand, trying to lose herself in words and forget the storm, both outside and the one inside her. She wasn't expecting company, but she heard footsteps. When she looked up, Cole stood in the doorway, his shirt damp from the rain, his dark hair a tousled mess, and his expression unreadable. "You're up late," he said. Harper swallowed and closed her book. Couldn't sleep. He stepped closer. Scared of storms. She shook her head.
"No."
"Then what is it?" His voice was soft, but there was something almost dangerous in the way he asked. "I don't know," she whispered.
A lie.
She knew exactly what it was. It was him. Cole didn't move right away. He studied her for a long moment, then took another slow step forward. "You sure about that?" The air shifted. Everything became heavy and charged. Harper should have gotten up. Should have walked away. Should have shut the door on whatever this was becoming. But when Cole reached out, his fingers brushing hers, she didn't pull away. Neither did he. The touch was small. Barely anything. But it was electric. A silent admission of everything they'd both been trying not to feel. And in that moment, Harper knew. This was the beginning of something neither of them would be able to stop. The next day, Harper tried to avoid him. She threw herself into housework, into anything that might distract her from the night before, from the feeling that still tingled in her skin. But Cole wasn't pretending. He found her in the library later that afternoon, leaning against the doorframe with that same infuriating, knowing smirk. "Trying to ignore me now?" Harper didn't look up from the book in her lap. "I don't know what you mean." He chuckled quietly. "Right." She flipped a page, forcing her voice steady. "Last night was nothing." He walked into the room, his voice lowering. "Then why are you so nervous?" She finally met his eyes, frustration flickering behind hers. "Because this is wrong, Cole." He didn't argue, didn't deny it. Instead, he sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off his skin. "Tell me you don't feel it," he murmured. Her heart thudded hard in her chest. She couldn't, because she did. and that terrified her more than anything else. That evening, Harper paced her bedroom. Her hands shook. Her thoughts raced.
She had to stop this.
Had to end whatever had started before it spiraled into something she couldn't control. So when she heard the knock at her door, her breath caught. She didn't need to look. She already knew. Still, she hesitated. And then, against every instinct, against every warning screaming in her mind, she opened the door. Cole stood there, damp from the rain, the hallway light casting shadows across his face. His eyes burned with something she wasn't ready to name. "Harper," he said, voice soft. She should have shut the door. Should have told him to leave. But she didn't. She stood still, caught in the pull of something inevitable. He stepped forward. The moment she let him inside, she knew it was a mistake.
He didn't speak. Neither did she.
But the air between them was thick with everything unsaid. Then, slowly, he reached for her. His fingers brushed her wrist, sending a shiver through her. It was already too late. There was no going back. She didn't know who moved first, him or her, but once the moment shifted, hesitation evaporated. And then there was only heat. Cole's hands found her waist, pulling her to him. His touch was firm, sure, completely unlike Julian's distant gentleness. This wasn't careful. It wasn't quiet. It was real. And it was undeniable. The fire that had been smoldering for far too long finally ignited. He whispered her name against her skin, his voice rough with emotion she couldn't quite name. Elena should have stopped it. She knew that. But she didn't. Instead, she let herself fall. Into his arms, into his warmth, into the aching pull of everything she had denied herself for so long. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. For the first time in years, she didn't care about the consequences. But consequences always came. And when they did, they never played fair. The days that followed blurred together. Elena had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She told herself it had been a mistake, a single moment of weakness. But that was a lie. It happened again. And again. Always in secret. Late at night, when the house was quiet. In hushed moments when Richard wasn't home. Every time, she promised herself it would be the last. And every time, he would draw her back in, just a look, a gentle touch, a whisper against her ear. They were playing a dangerous game. And it was only a matter of time before everything unraveled. One evening, while she sat in the garden with a book she wasn't reading, Elena felt it a shift. Richard had been watching her more closely lately. His usual apathy had been replaced with something else. Suspicion. At dinner, it finally came to a head. "You've been distant," Richard said casually, setting down his wine glass. His eyes studied her carefully. "You and Damon, you seem close." Her pulse spiked. She forced a laugh, as light and dismissive as she could manage. "He's my stepson, Richard. What exactly are you implying?" He tilted his head, eyes unreadable. "Forget I said anything." But the doubt lingered, heavy in the air between them. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she heard soft footsteps outside her door. She didn't have to look to know who it was. And despite everything, despite the fear, the guilt, the danger, she rose and opened the door. Damon stood there, his expression unreadable, his presence intoxicating. "Elena," he murmured. She reached for him before she could think, fingers fisting the fabric of his shirt as she pulled him inside. The door closed behind them with a final, damning click. "This has to stop," she whispered. He searched her eyes. "Do you want it to?" She should have said yes. But when he touched her, when he kissed her, slow, tender, knowing, she couldn't lie. She didn't want it to stop. And that was the real problem. Because the closer they got, the more inevitable the fall became. The house was too quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. This was the kind that signaled something was coming. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, her hands gripping the sheets, her breath shallow. Every choice, every secret, pressed against her chest like a weight she could no longer carry. Damon stood in the doorway, his jaw tight, his eyes dark with a storm she couldn't name. Hurt, regret, love. She didn't know anymore. Say something, she whispered. He exhaled slowly. What is there left to say? That you still love me, she said, barely above a breath. A humorless laugh escaped him. Love. He stepped forward, his presence overwhelming. Love isn't supposed to feel like this. It's not supposed to be lies and guilt and consequences we can't escape. I never meant for this to happen, she said. But it did, he replied, his voice low, tired, but laced with a quiet tenderness. And now what? She asked. Where do we go from here? They both knew there was no easy answer. But then footsteps. Liam Carter's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Elena. Damon. She turned slowly, her heart slamming in her chest. Liam stood in the hallway, his face unreadable. Had he heard? Had he known? Then he said the words that shattered her. I know everything. The world tilted. Damon's fists clenched at his sides. Liam, she began. Don't, he said calmly. Too calmly. I don't need excuses. I just want to know one thing. His gaze darkened. Was it worth it? The silence stretched. Elena couldn't breathe. Had the moments of stolen passion, the whispered confessions, really been worth the wreckage? I love her, Damon said softly. Liam let out a bitter laugh. Of course you do. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, without another word, Liam turned and walked away. No screaming. No rage. Just quiet devastation. Elena's knees gave out beneath her. Damon. But he was already following. She reached for him. Wait. I have to fix this, he said. And if you can't, he paused. His voice was barely audible. Then I have to live with it. And just like Liam, he was gone. The house fell silent once more. But this time, the silence felt final. What would you have done in Elena's place? Would you have chosen love or loyalty? Let me know in the comments. And if this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.
See you next time.